All right, welcome to today's Explainer. So today we're going to unpack the source material behind something we literally use every single day, but honestly, we almost never think about it. I'm talking about the architecture of human connection. You know, when we hear the word architecture, our brains instantly go to steel, concrete, blueprints, that whole shebang. But the actual framework of how we connect, how we build our relationships, our organizations, our entire civilization, it's completely invisible. And it is happening all around us every second of our waking lives. So, get ready to focus in because we're going to uncover the hidden mechanics of how we truly connect with one another.
Which brings us to a huge, fundamental question. What is the true lifeblood of human interaction? Now, your first instinct might just be to say, well, it's talking, right? Speaking words. But actually, scratch that. Think about it. If simply opening our mouths and making noise was all it took, we wouldn't accidentally offend our coworkers over email nearly as much as we do, right? We've all been there. You send a quick message, it lands totally wrong, and boom, instant friction. That right there proves that this lifeblood, this vital pumping force shaping our world, goes way, way beyond just transmitting words. It is something much more dynamic.
At its core, communication is defined as the exchange of ideas, emotions, or information to create a shared understanding and influence a thought or action. And the absolute key phrase I want you to lock onto here is shared understanding. It's kind of like Bluetooth pairing. We aren't just throwing info at a wall and hoping it somehow sticks. We are actively trying to sync up our inner world with someone else's, so the person on the receiving end sees the exact same picture we do. It's about successfully bridging that gap between two independent minds. When that sync actually works, it fundamentally alters the experience. It becomes a shared, mutual event, not just a one-way broadcast.
So, how do we actually achieve that shared understanding? Well, we rely on structural pillars, what the source material categorizes as the four modalities. Now, what's really interesting here is how these four diverse, distinct types of communication, verbal, nonverbal, written, and visual, are perfectly equal partners. None of these is inherently more important or more valuable than the others. Instead, they serve incredibly unique purposes. When we use them together, they form this complete 360-degree method for sharing our ideas and making sure we are truly understood. It's a holistic toolkit. I mean, you wouldn't try to build a house using only a hammer, right? In the exact same way, we rarely rely on just one single way of communicating to get our most important points across. Let's break down the first half of that toolkit. First up, we have verbal communication, which uses spoken language to connect. This is the one we're probably most consciously familiar with, the specific words we choose, our vocabulary, the tone of our voice. But right alongside it is nonverbal communication, expressed through our gestures, our posture, and facial expressions. And what's absolutely fascinating is how these two have to work in real-time tandem to convey deep, accurate meaning. Just picture someone crossing their arms tightly, glaring at the floor and muttering, "I'm fine." The verbal language is explicitly saying one thing, but their nonverbal language is literally screaming the exact opposite. To build real connection, those physical expressions and spoken words have to align perfectly. Contrasting that real-time, face-to-face connection, we have written and visual communication. Written communication documents our ideas for permanence. When you write something down, it actively outlasts the moment it was created. That is exactly why we sign legal contracts instead of just shaking hands. It allows complex agreements and histories to be preserved long into the future. Visual communication, on the flip side, conveys meaning almost instantly through symbols, images, and design. Visuals do something kind of magical. They totally bypass the need for 1,000 written words, delivering immediate clarity. Think about a red stop sign at an intersection. It doesn't need a massive paragraph explaining traffic laws. It delivers a huge amount of crucial information in a fraction of a second. Together, written permanence and visual immediacy round out our four foundational pillars.
But here's the thing, static pillars just aren't enough on their own. Communication is highly dynamic. It's an interactive, continuous process that requires what we can think of as the engine of interaction.
And this engine needs three crucial components to keep running smoothly. Step one is channels. You gotta have a medium, whether that's a phone call, an email, or a quick face-to-face chat, to actually carry the message from point A to point B. Step two is context. This is absolutely critical because context shapes the interpretation. The environment, your relationship history, the timing, all of this completely dictates how a message lands. For instance, a sarcastic, off-the-cuff joke made at a casual weekend party? Totally fine. But that exact same joke during a tense boardroom meeting? Yikes, very different result.
Finally, step 3 is feedback. This is the loop that confirms understanding. Without feedback, you're honestly just broadcasting into a void, hoping the other person is tuned to the right station. It's this continuous cycle, choosing a channel, reading the context, and seeking feedback that keeps the engine running. And the stakes for keeping that engine well-maintained are incredibly high. Effective communication is highly purposeful, it's clear, and most importantly, it is adaptable. When you purposefully adapt to the person you are connecting with, altering your channel or your tone based on the context, you create harmony and efficiency. But when we fail to adapt, or when we just ignore the context entirely, we stumble right into ineffective communication. And as the source material points out, this inevitably breeds misunderstanding, resentment, and outright conflict. The difference between purposeful adaptation and rigid inefficiency is quite literally the difference between deep connection and constant, frustrating conflict in our lives.
Which brings us to this really profound realization from our source. Ultimately, communication is both an art and a science, enabling collaboration, persuasion, and learning. Bridging the gap between two people requires the measurable, structural skill of a scientist, knowing how to logically select the right channels, analyze the environment, and gather empirical data through feedback. But it equally demands the creative empathy of an artist. You have to be able to read a room, adapt to subtle nonverbal cues, and understand the shifting emotional context of the person standing right in front of you. When you manage to combine the strict science of delivery with the nuanced art of empathy, you unlock the ultimate ability to collaborate, to persuade, and to genuinely learn from one another.
So when we zoom out to a macro level, we realize that this dynamic exchange is truly the bedrock of our entire society. It is the foundation upon which we build trust, knowledge, and progress. Think about it. You simply cannot build genuine, lasting trust in any relationship without clear, honest, and shared understanding. You can't expand human knowledge across generations without the rigorous written and visual documentation of our ideas. And you certainly cannot achieve meaningful progress in any community without the ability to collaborate and persuade. Everything we deeply value rests securely right on top of this fundamental architecture.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. How are you building the architecture of trust in your own life? Take a hard look at your daily interactions. Are you purposefully adapting your message to the people around you? Are your nonverbal cues actually matching your spoken words, or are they telling two completely different stories? Are you actively seeking feedback to ensure a true, shared understanding, or are you just broadcasting into the void? Take the art and the science of connection and start actively applying it to your life today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and until next time, keep building.